Captain Arian Valis stood on the command deck of the Concorde, his eyes fixed on the endless black void of space. The stars twinkled distant and indifferent, but something had broken the silence of the galaxy, something unexpected. A single, faint transmission had appeared on the ship's radar. An emergency signal. Unmistakable. But where it came from was the real mystery. "Are you sure about this, Captain?" Lieutenant Talia Marak's voice cut through the heavy stillness. She leaned over Valis' shoulder, her sharp gaze scanning the data screen. "I mean, it's Earth. Isn't that the Deathworld?" Valis let out a low sigh, his hand tapping against the metal railing beside him. "Earth. The planet that had long been deemed a dangerous anomaly, too volatile and unpredictable for galactic engagement. The Federation had written it off centuries ago. Humanity was on its own. Yet here they were, on the verge of investigating a signal that shouldn't exist." "It's real," Valis said, his voice steady despite the knot forming in his stomach. "And it's coming from Earth." The transmission was not an ordinary distress call. It was something more sophisticated, too well structured to be a simple cry for help. The message had repeated itself on a loop, almost as if it was designed to be found, an invitation. "Maybe it's a trap," Zeta 5, the ship's AI, interjected coldly from the control panel. Its voice was devoid of emotion, a perfect contrast to the tension mounting around the room. "Earth has been categorized as a hostile, death-dealing planet. It is illogical to engage with it." "I'm aware, Zeta," Valis replied, his tone clipped. He turned to face the rest of the crew, who were stationed at their posts, eyes fixed on their work. "But someone down there needs help. We can't ignore this." There was a sharp intake of breath from Talia. Her youthful face flushed with a mix of curiosity and excitement. "You think humanity's still out there? After all this time?" Valis stared out into the void, his mind flicking through the many theories that had been proposed over the years, most of them ridiculous. Earth was a legend now, a fading myth in the history books of the Federation. But something about this signal, the persistence of it, gnawed at him. "I think they're more than just still out there," Valis said, his voice hardening with determination. "I think Earth's people have survived, and they've changed." Talia's eyes sparkled with hope. "You think they've adapted? Like us?" Valis didn't answer immediately, letting the weight of his words sink in. He thought of the last known records of Earth, of the wars, the chaos, the relentless brutality of its ecosystem. Those who had tried to colonize it had either perished or left in shame, their ships filled with wounded or broken souls. But the signal suggested something different. Something new. Maybe Earth had learned to survive where others had failed. Maybe humanity had become more than the primitive species they were once thought to be. Zeta interrupted, its voice cutting through the heavy silence. "Hypothesis: Earth's ecosystem may have evolved further than Federation intelligence anticipated. The signal's persistence could indicate a survival strategy unknown to galactic civilizations." "Exactly," Valis said. "Which is why we're going down there." Talia's grin was wide, infectious. "So we're going to be the first to meet them?" Valis turned back to the controls, the decision final in his mind. "We're going to find out what they've become. If they've survived, no. If they've thrived, then we need to know how. It could change everything." Zeta's sensors flickered, then went quiet. There was no further objection. Valis' hands hovered over the console. He knew the risks. Earth was still considered a death world for a reason. The planet's very atmosphere was a minefield of unpredictable weather, violent animal life, and dangerous terrain. But the galaxy had underestimated Earth before. It was time for humanity to prove they were more than the sum of their chaotic, war-torn history. "We're going," Valis said, his decision unshakable. "Prepare for entry." The ship's engines hummed to life, a soft tremor running through the deck as the Concorde surged forward. Outside the viewing port, Earth loomed, distant but growing closer with every passing moment. A swirl of clouds danced over the planet's surface, dark, violent, and ominous. Talia's voice cut through the growing tension. "What do you think we'll find down there?" Valis paused, his gaze still fixed on the planet. The answer he gave felt like a vow, though he didn't fully understand why. I don't know. But I think Earth has a secret. And it's time to uncover it. The Concorde hurtled toward Earth's atmosphere, a ship carrying more than just its crew. It carried the weight of the galaxy's expectations. Valis could feel it in the pit of his stomach, the rising tension. The Federation had written off Earth. Now, they had no choice but to face the consequences of that decision. As they entered the atmosphere, a massive storm flared up on the horizon, shapes moving within the clouds, monstrous, unseen, yet distinctly alive. Valis tightened his grip on the console. The storm was just the beginning. Earth had always been unpredictable, but now, it was clear, it was also far more dangerous than anyone had ever believed. And somewhere below, humanity waited. The storm appeared without warning. One moment, Earth's dark, swirling atmosphere had seemed distant and indifferent, a curious backdrop to the Federation's descent. The next, it exploded into violent chaos, tearing across the skies with a fury that made the most savage of space storms seem like a gentle breeze. Hold on! Captain Arian Valis barked, gripping the controls of the Concorde as the ship's hull groaned under the pressure. The ship bucked and twisted, the instruments flashing warnings in every corner of the bridge. Lieutenant Talia Marak, her face pale from the sudden onslaught, steadied herself next to Valis. "What the hell is happening?" she shouted, her voice lost in the deafening roar of the storm's interference. "Earth's atmosphere is more unstable than we anticipated," Valis muttered, his fingers dancing over the console. His mind raced through every contingency plan he had studied. "We need to cut through the ion fields and get below the storm's cloud layer." Zeta 5, the ship's AI, interjected, its cold voice reverberating through the command center. "Probability of survival through this storm is 13%. Recommend immediate retreat." Valis' jaw tightened. The AI was pragmatic, yes, but it lacked the instinct that came with human decision-making. Retreat is not an option. Not yet. The ship shuddered again, the lights flickering as the turbulence grew worse. Outside the viewport, the storm was a swirling mass of black and white, with jagged streaks of lightning lashing across the sky. The sensors showed nothing but chaos, a storm unlike anything recorded in Federation archives. There was no predicting it. "We're losing control," shouted Talia as another violent gust rocked the ship, sending her stumbling into a console. She quickly righted herself, eyes wide with the realization that they were in real danger. Valis' hand flew to the throttle, pushing it forward. The Concorde lurched ahead, engines screaming in protest as it fought its way deeper into the storm. The ship's shields flared to life, glowing blue, but they flickered with every pulse of the storm. "Zeta, reroute auxiliary power to shields. Get us below this damn cloud layer, now!" Valis barked, his voice firm and steady despite the mounting pressure. The AI responded instantly, its voice uncharacteristically terse. "Power rerouted. New trajectory locked. Brace for impact." Suddenly, the storm seemed to open up before them, a vast hole in the clouds, a turbulent calm that led downward, toward what could only be the surface of Earth. But just as quickly as the opening appeared, the storm closed in again, trapping them in an even more chaotic swirl of winds and electric pulses. The ship's controls became erratic, and for a heart-stopping moment, Valis felt the weight of their peril. The calm had been an illusion. "What the hell is down there?" Talia muttered, her gaze fixed on the viewport as the storm continued its onslaught. "It's Earth," Valis said, his voice low, as if the answer alone was enough. "And nothing on this planet obeys the rules we know. This storm is just a glimpse." The atmosphere cracked with a violent rumble, and suddenly, a massive shape, dark and jagged, flashed across the view. Valis' heart skipped a beat. "Captain, what was that?" Talia asked, a tremor in her voice as she scrambled to pull up the ship's sensors. Valis didn't need to ask. He had seen it too. It was a massive structure, partially obscured by the storm, but unmistakably made by human hands, ruins, perhaps, or something more. A city? A colony? It was impossible to tell. Before he could respond, a warning light blinked on the console. The ship's shields were failing. The electromagnetic pulses from the storm had overloaded the external circuits. Valis cursed under his breath, his mind racing. "Zeta, we can't take another hit like that." Valis snapped, slamming his fist against the console. "Is there any way to stabilize the ship?" "Negative," Zeta replied immediately. "The shields are at 14% capacity. We are vulnerable to further storm activity. I recommend immediate evasive maneuvers." Valis didn't have time for evasive maneuvers. Earth was right below them. They couldn't afford to risk a crash landing. "Prepare for impact," he ordered grimly. The storm's rage was relentless. The Concorde lurched violently again, and for a brief moment, Valis lost his grip on the controls. A sharp cry from Talia rang out, followed by the sudden, terrifying groan of the ship's hull, as if it were going to tear apart at the seams. Then, everything went dark. When the lights flickered back on, Valis was still in his seat, his knuckles white from gripping the armrests. The ship had descended, but not without damage. The command center was littered with sparks, warning lights flashing across every screen. Talia was already on her feet, checking the sensors. "We've made it," she said, her voice shaky but full of relief. "We're..." Her words were cut off by a violent jolt. The ship's landing gear slammed into the surface with a harsh thud, sending the crew lurching forward. The storm's fury was now a distant howl, but the danger wasn't over. Valis pushed himself upright, checking the monitors. The ship's landing site was surrounded by dense forest, strange, unkempt, and alive with sounds that shouldn't belong on a planet classified as a Deathworld. The trees were taller than anything he'd seen, their trunks gnarled and twisted in unnatural patterns. The air was thick, heavy with humidity and the smell of damp earth. And from the horizon, a distant, shadowy figure moved through the trees. "We're not alone," Valis said, his voice low and grim. He keyed in a command on the panel. "Get ready, Talia. We've just landed on a planet that doesn't play by anyone's rules. Time to find out what's really going on here." Talia nodded, eyes flashing with excitement and fear. "Let's make sure we're ready for whatever's coming." Outside the ship, the shadows continued to shift. The planet had only begun to reveal its secrets. The air inside the Concorde was heavy with anticipation. The ship had been silent since its rough landing. The hum of the engines, now quiet, left a void that was filled only by the soft beeping of diagnostic systems and the occasional static crackle from the communications panel. Captain Valis stood near the ship's viewport, his eyes scanning the dense forest that surrounded them. The trees were a twisted mess of towering trunks and thick foliage, their leaves tinged in unnatural shades of green and brown. The air outside was thick, almost suffocating, like it carried the weight of the planet itself. Talia Marak stepped beside him, her eyes narrowed as she too examined the landscape. "If this is Earth, it's nothing like the records say," she murmured, her voice soft with wonder and a tinge of fear. "It's like a jungle, but wrong. The plants, the colors, they're not like anything we know." Valis glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "No, it's not. This isn't Earth as we remember it." His hand tightened on the railing in front of him, the metal cool under his fingertips. "But it's still Earth. And we need to figure out why this place is hiding so many secrets." There was a long pause before Zeta 5's voice interrupted the silence. "Environmental analysis indicates unstable atmospheric conditions. Heat signatures detected nearby, consistent with biological activity. Caution is advised." Valis exhaled, pushing away from the railing. "We'll proceed with caution, Zeta. Prepare the landing gear and suit up. We're heading out." The crew moved quickly, gathering their equipment. Talia was already at the weapons locker, her hands moving efficiently as she checked her blaster's power cells and secured her survival gear. Valis watched her for a moment, noting the tension in her shoulders, the edge in her eyes. This was different from the enthusiastic curiosity she'd shown earlier. The reality of being on an unknown, hostile world was starting to set in. "We're ready," Talia said, holstering her blaster and adjusting the straps on her pack. Valis nodded, then turned to the rest of the crew. His gaze lingered on each member for a moment, an experienced group, every one of them aware of the risks, yet driven by the same desire to uncover the truth. They were a team. And right now, they were about to test the limits of that unity. The airlock hissed as it opened, the ramp descending with a soft whir. Outside, the planet's surface greeted them with an oppressive heat, the kind that clung to your skin and made the air feel thick, almost viscous. As they stepped out of the ship, the crunch of their boots on the dry, uneven ground was the only sound breaking the eerie stillness. Valis glanced up. The sky was an unsettling shade of purple, tinged with strange, swirling clouds that seemed to move unnaturally, as if alive. The storm they had just passed through still loomed in the distance, but here, the air was eerily still, the storm's fury muted and far away. "Let's move out," Valis said, his voice low but firm. The team fanned out, their footsteps soft against the cracked earth. The forest around them was quiet, but not empty. Strange noises echoed in the distance, distant roars, the rustling of something large moving through the undergrowth, and a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the ground itself. It was impossible to tell where the sounds were coming from, but they were everywhere. It felt like the planet itself was watching them. "What the hell is that?" Talia whispered, her hand instinctively reaching for her blaster. Valis paused, his eyes scanning the horizon. "I don't know. But stay alert." They continued moving, deeper into the wilderness, their eyes darting back and forth as they navigated through the dense foliage. Suddenly, the ground beneath them trembled. A distant rumble, like the roar of an approaching storm, but far more menacing. "Movement ahead," Zeta 5 warned, its voice calm but firm. "Heat signatures are converging on your location. Estimated time of arrival, 2 minutes." Valis signaled for the team to halt. They huddled behind a cluster of thick bushes, the scent of wet earth and decaying vegetation thick in the air. Talia crouched beside him, her breath shallow. "I think it's time to find out who, or what, wants to say hello," she said, her voice tight with anticipation. "Agreed," Valis muttered, his fingers brushing the handle of his blaster. He turned to the team. "We stick together. Stay close. We don't know what we're dealing with." The ground shook again, this time stronger. The bushes parted, revealing a clearing just ahead. And in that clearing, moving with a grace that belied its size, stood a creature unlike anything Valis had seen. It was humanoid, but massive, easily 10 feet tall, its body covered in thick, leathery skin that shimmered in the dim light. Its head was elongated, a pair of dark, piercing eyes gleaming with intelligence, but what caught Valis' attention most was the weapon in its hand, an enormous spear, the tip gleaming with an unnatural sheen. For a long moment, there was silence. The creature stood still, watching them, its chest rising and falling with steady breaths. Then, without warning, it let out a low growl, a rumbling sound that vibrated through the air. Talia raised her blaster, but Valis stopped her with a firm gesture. "No. Not yet." The creature's eyes locked onto Valis, and for a moment, they stood there, staring at each other, as if sizing each other up. Then, to Valis' surprise, it lowered its weapon slightly and took a step forward. "Looks like the welcome committee is here," Talia whispered, her voice barely audible. Valis took a cautious step forward. This was Earth. It was humanity's birthplace, but it was no longer their world. The creature in front of him wasn't human, not exactly. But it was alive. It was intelligent. And it might just be their first clue in solving the mystery of what Earth had become. "Stay sharp," Valis muttered, his eyes never leaving the creature. "We're about to learn more than we bargained for." The creature took another step forward, and Valis held his breath. The encounter was just beginning. The creature's eyes glowed, the darkness of the forest swallowed by the eerie gleam. Its massive form loomed before them, shifting slightly as it adjusted its grip on the long spear. The tension was palpable. Valis could feel every beat of his heart like a drum in his chest, but his mind remained calm. He needed answers. "Stay close," he ordered softly, eyes never leaving the creature. His hand hovered just above the hilt of his blaster, ready for anything, though he felt a curious unease that hadn't been present before. This wasn't just a beast. There was a purpose behind its actions. The creature, whatever it was, had a presence, a message in its eyes. Talia stood beside him, her weapon still aimed, but she wasn't quick to fire. "What do you think it wants?" she whispered, her voice full of uncertainty. "I'm not sure," Valis replied, his voice low. "But we're about to find out." The creature took another step forward, its movements slow but deliberate. Valis could sense the tension in the air thickening, the sense of being watched growing. Then, unexpectedly, it lowered its spear completely, resting the weapon shaft against the ground with a heavy thud. It raised one of its hands, a gesture not of aggression but of peace. Valis exchanged a quick glance with Talia. She seemed just as confused as he was, but her grip on her blaster loosened ever so slightly. "It's not hostile," she murmured, though her words hung in the air with uncertainty. The creature didn't speak, but the meaning was clear. It was waiting. Waiting for them to do something, to make the next move. Valis took a deep breath, stepping forward, closer to the towering being, his boots pressing into the soft, damp earth. "Are you the one controlling this place?" Valis called out, his voice steady but laced with a quiet curiosity. "Do you know what has happened to Earth?" For a moment, nothing happened. The creature only stared at him, its alien eyes dark and unfathomable, like ancient pools of knowledge. Then, a low hum resonated from deep within its chest, the sound vibrating in the air. Valis could feel it in his bones. The creature was speaking, but not with words. "Did you hear that?" Talia asked, her voice tense. Valis nodded, his eyes narrowing. The hum wasn't a random noise, it was deliberate. Slowly, the creature raised its head toward the sky, letting out a single, long, melodic note that seemed to stretch across the horizon. The sound was unlike anything Valis had ever encountered. It was pure, like a vibration of the planet itself. The trees around them rustled, as if responding to the call. Then, the creature lowered its head again and made a slow, deliberate gesture toward the ground. A deep rumble echoed in the distance, and the earth trembled once more. From behind the creature, the ground began to shift. Valis' eyes widened. Something was emerging, no, someone was emerging from the earth itself. A second figure appeared, rising from the soil, its form slowly taking shape. This one was taller, its silhouette more defined, more humanoid. As it fully materialized, Valis felt a shiver run down his spine. It was like looking at a reflection of humanity, but twisted. The being's skin shimmered with iridescent hues, and its body radiated an aura of power. Its face was strikingly human, but its eyes, those were different. They glowed with an intensity that could burn through the very fabric of space. The first creature, the one with the spear, lowered its head once again, now fully subservient to the figure that emerged from the earth. Valis, feeling a knot tighten in his stomach, stepped back. "What are they?" Talia whispered, her voice full of awe and fear. Before Valis could answer, the tall figure's gaze locked onto him. It spoke, not with sound, but in a deep, resonating voice that filled the very air. "We are the Guardians. The keepers of Earth's legacy. You, too, are of Earth, but your world has forgotten. We have been waiting." The words washed over him like a wave. It was true, this wasn't the Earth he knew, but it was their Earth, the true, untouched Earth, shielded and forgotten for so long. "Waiting for us?" Valis murmured. The Guardian's eyes softened slightly, but there was a sadness there that seemed to stretch back through millennia. "You were never meant to leave. But you did. You forgot your roots. Now you return, seeking the truth. You will understand soon." Valis took a step forward, his heart pounding in his chest. What happened to Earth? Why was it abandoned? The Guardian extended one long, glowing arm, pointing toward the horizon. The earth split open, revealing the shimmering remnants of a long-buried city. Ancient and grand, its architecture defied time, a reminder of what once was. The air hummed with an energy Valis had never felt before. the humans left. But the world was always alive. It waited, hidden from the stars, preserved in its own time. It watched. For a moment, silence enveloped them all. Talia finally lowered her blaster. "You mean Earth is still alive? After all this time?" The Guardian nodded slowly. "The world is not just a place, it is a living entity. And it has not forgotten you." Valis stood in awe, the magnitude of their discovery settling in. Earth had not been destroyed or abandoned, it had been waiting, alive in ways they couldn't yet comprehend. This was not just their home. It was something far greater. Humanity's return was just the beginning. A crackling hum filled the air as the Guardian stepped back, vanishing into the mist of the forgotten world. The ground slowly settled, leaving the team standing at the precipice of a new era. "We have to go back," Valis said, his voice firm, filled with purpose. "The rest of the galaxy needs to know. Earth isn't a death world. It's something far more, something powerful." Talia looked at him, her face full of awe. "Then we'll make them listen." With the ancient city at their backs and the weight of humanity's lost legacy ahead of them, Valis knew this was just the beginning of a journey that would change everything. The galaxy wouldn't be the same. And Earth? Earth was no longer just a forgotten home, it was a force that would shape the future. And the mystery of Earth, of humanity's place in the stars, had only just begun.